Slippy Toad. When Star Fox 64 launched in 1997, players were thrilled by the voice-acted dogfights and memorable crew banter. But one member of the team became infamous for all the wrong reasons: Slippy Toad. While he was supposed to be the squad's tech expert, all players heard was, "Fox, get this guy off me," over and over again. Slippy constantly got into trouble, and it was your job to save him, even if that meant taking damage or ruining your kill streak. His high-pitched voice got on your nerves, and unlike Peppy or Falco, he never had anything useful to say. It wasn't long before players were intentionally letting him get shot down, just for some peace and quiet. What made it worse? He somehow survived every mission. Nintendo probably meant for Slippy to be comic relief, but fans didn't laugh, they groaned. And years later, his reputation hasn't recovered. In a game full of iconic moments, Slippy became the sidekick no one wanted to remember. Navi. In The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, players were given a companion to help navigate Hyrule's vast world, a tiny glowing fairy named Navi. At first, she seemed helpful. She locked onto enemies, gave hints, and kept you pointed in the right direction. But it didn't take long for her constant interruptions to wear thin. Her shouting, "Hey, listen," became less of a friendly nudge and more of a dreaded alarm bell. She repeated the same tips, often at the worst possible moments, mid-battle, mid-puzzle, or mid-conversation. And unlike other annoying NPCs, you couldn't mute her, avoid her, or even swat her away. She was always there, chirping in your ear like a mosquito with a walkie-talkie. Fans begged for an option to turn her off, but there was none. Despite being part of one of the most beloved games of all time, Navi's legacy is cemented as one of the most irritating characters in Nintendo history. And every time someone says, "Hey, listen," gamers everywhere flinch. Ashley Graham. When Resident Evil 4 released in 2005, it redefined survival horror, but it also introduced one of the most despised companions in gaming, Ashley Graham. As the president's daughter, Ashley's role was to be rescued, constantly. But what made her so frustrating wasn't just the plot, it was how she played. She had no combat skills, no defense, and no awareness. If an enemy got near her, she'd scream. If you accidentally aimed near her, she'd duck right into your line of fire. And worst of all, she wouldn't stop yelling, "Leon, help!" every 10 seconds. Escorting her through zombie-infested villages felt more like dragging around a liability than saving someone important. Players dreaded missions that required protecting her. Some even modded her out of the game entirely. While Resident Evil 4 is considered a masterpiece, Ashley's legacy has remained mostly as a running joke, the digital equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. Her gameplay wasn't just difficult, it was exhausting. Tom Nook. At first glance, Tom Nook seems harmless, a chubby raccoon in a sweater vest welcoming you to your new life in Animal Crossing. But behind the warm smile lies one of gaming's most controversial figures. From the moment you arrive, Nook offers you a home, along with a massive debt you never asked for. No interest, no deadline, just a quiet expectation that you'll work tirelessly to pay him back. Sounds friendly, right? But over time, fans started to question his motives. Every upgrade leads to another loan. Every favor feels like a transaction. And while Nook insists it's all optional, you're constantly nudged to earn, grind, and expand, all under his watchful eye. He doesn't yell or threaten. He doesn't need to. Players jokingly call him a capitalist kingpin in disguise, a smiling face of cozy financial manipulation. For a game about relaxing, Tom Nook sure makes you feel like you're stuck in a mortgage loop, and somehow, he always profits. Roman Bellic. In Grand Theft Auto 4, Roman Bellic was supposed to be your lovable cousin, a fresh start in Liberty City full of dreams and bad jokes. But within hours, players learned the truth. Roman wasn't a helpful ally. He was a walking distraction. Every few minutes, your phone would buzz. "Cousin, let's go bowling!" Or darts, or drinking. Anything that pulled you away from the mission you were actually trying to complete. At first, it was quirky. Then it got repetitive. After a while, it got infuriating. The worst part, ignoring him made you feel guilty. The game subtly punished you by lowering your relationship status with him, impacting certain rewards. So you were either dodging his calls or sitting through yet another awkward bowling minigame while he rambled about nothing. Roman became the face of unwanted interruptions. For a game all about freedom and chaos, Roman made you feel trapped, in a cousin's never-ending weekend plans. Preston Garvey. When Fallout 4 launched, players were ready to rebuild civilization in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But then came Preston Garvey, and suddenly it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about settlements. Preston, who was a member of the Minutemen, starts off as a noble leader trying to help others. But once you agree to work with him, the real cycle begins. Another settlement needs your help, over and over. No matter how many missions you completed, no matter how far you progressed, Preston always had one more urgent request. At first, players tried to keep up, saving farms, defending villages, building defenses. But eventually, it became clear The tasks never stopped, ever. Preston turned into a meme, a symbol of infinite fetch quests wrapped in sincerity. Even ignoring him didn't work. He just waited at Sanctuary Hills, ready to guilt you with that familiar line. What was meant to be helpful ended up becoming one of the most exhausting loops in modern gaming. Claptrap. When Borderlands burst onto the scene in 2009, it was chaotic, quirky, and definitely loud. It's safe to say no character embodied that more than Claptrap, the hyperactive robot with a voice that could cut through steel. At first, it was entertaining, breaking the fourth wall, cracking jokes, dancing badly, but it didn't take long for the charm to wear thin. Claptrap talked constantly, often interrupting missions with long-winded monologues that went nowhere. His humor leaned heavily on randomness, and instead of being clever, it often came off as try-hard. Some players found him endearing, like an annoying little brother, but many just muted the volume. He was the kind of character who mistook noise for personality, and when he returned in every single sequel, fans rolled their eyes. Claptrap was quite annoying, kind of like the one acquaintance who overstayed their welcome. In a game full of wild characters, somehow he became the loudest, and the least wanted. Jason Brody. In Far Cry 3, you're dropped onto a dangerous island as Jason Brody, a privileged thrill seeker suddenly forced to become a warrior. But while the gameplay was thrilling and the villains stole the spotlight, Jason himself quickly wore thin. His transformation from scared tourist to expert killer felt rushed, and more importantly, unearned. Players didn't relate to his panic or his bravado. He often came off as entitled, detached, and oddly unfazed by the chaos around him. While his friends were captured or dying, Jason cracked jokes and dove deeper into the power fantasy. Some movements tried to show emotional depth, but they felt inconsistent, a shallow contrast to the layered villain he shared the screen with. And compared to later protagonists in the series, Jason lacked nuance. Fans weren't rooting for him, they were tolerating him. In a game full of fire and madness, the one thing that didn't ignite was a Tiro. Micah Bell. From the moment he opened his mouth in Red Dead Redemption 2, players knew something was off about Micah Bell. While the rest of the Van der Line gang felt like family, flawed but loyal, Micah was different. Arrogant, twitchy, always stirring up trouble. He talked too much, fought too dirty, and never seemed to take responsibility for anything. But it wasn't until the story unfolded that players' suspicions turned to outright hatred. Micah was certainly annoying, but even worse, he was a traitor, manipulating Dutch, undermining Arthur, and slowly tearing apart the game from the inside. He became the epitome of betrayal. Rockstar designed him to be loathed, and they succeeded. Every sneer, every smug line, every mission with him made players grit their teeth. By the time the truth was out, it wasn't just Arthur who wanted revenge, it was everyone. Micah Bell isn't hated because he's poorly written, he's hated because he's too well written, as the snake in the group. The Adoring Fan. In The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, achieving champion status in the arena felt like a true accomplishment, until he showed up. The Adoring Fan. Blonde-haired, wide-eyed, and painfully enthusiastic, he instantly attached himself to you, following your every step with relentless praise. At first, it was funny, a quirky reward for your arena victories, but quickly, the novelty wore off. He never helped in combat, never offered anything useful, just constant compliments in a high-pitched, irritating voice. Worse, he was marked as essential, meaning you couldn't even get rid of him permanently. Push him off a cliff, he respawned. Abandon him in a dungeon, he'd find his way back. He was inescapable. Over time, he became a meme, a punchline, and a test of patience. Bethesda may have meant for him to be comic relief, but for many players, the Adoring Fan became a lingering reminder that even in a world of dragons and magic, you're never truly alone. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.